Wir haben, glaube ich, die schönste Interview-Location, die man sich überhaupt nur vorstellen kann. Wir sitzen hier unter der prächtigen Kastanie direkt am Gasteig und ich freue mich sehr, einen unserer Gäste dieses Jahr aus dem Cinemasters-Wettbewerb hier zu haben. Er hat seinen 5. Film zu uns nach München gebracht. The Place of No Words wird bei uns gezeigt auf dem Filmfest München 2019 und ich freue mich sehr, ihn jetzt begrüßen zu dürfen. Good morning, Mark Webber. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
I have a very simple question and I hope the answer is also easy for you.
Okay.
What's your film about?
Dying. Where do we go when we die? It's pretty that simple. And also about living, like what it's like to live and how we assign meaning to that through our imagination, the belief systems that we make up for ourselves.
And that film is part of a trilogy.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk about the trilogy a little bit before we talk about your style of filmmaking.
Sure.
What are the 2 other films about?
The 2 other films, I started making these films in this way that I call reality cinema, which is basically using a real life relationship, a family member or a friend, and kind of tapping into our real dynamic and mining that and using that and putting that into a fictional narrative, you know, to explore, generally, for me, the most part, something existential, you know, like what it is to be here, what it means to love, what it means to be a parent or a son or a brother, just a human being, essentially. And the first movie in this trilogy is called The End of Love, and I made it with my first son, Isaac, when he was 2. And it was about a single father grieving a sudden loss in his life. And that's where I really found my voice as a filmmaker, I say. Like, it was, you know, I wanted to put a real, authentic kind of father-son relationship on screen in a way that you don't typically see in kind of, I don't know, Hollywood films or most films in general, really. I wanted to explore reality as much as possible. And then my follow-up film to that was called Flesh and Blood, and I made that with my mom and my brother and
also your estranged father.
And my estranged father, yeah. And, you know, also a man on a quest to kind of heal trauma in his life. And then it culminated with this film, The Place of No Words. And going back and working with my son Bodhi at a similar age to Isaac. Bodhi was 3 when we made the film, but.
So, I mean, there are so many questions you want to ask about this style of making films. And maybe we start with, you can just explain how it works and how, I mean, we can start with the latest film. How do you shoot that? I mean, how do you write? How much do you improvise? And how do you work with your own child, which is, you know, when it's so small still?
I love to talk about it because it is so different, and it's really, the more I talk about it, the more I realize that I'm still kind of defining it myself fully, because a lot of it, there is magic that happens, and I look at them as gifts. You know, there's something about intention, you know, when you set out to make a piece of art and you get a good group of people together and they believe in that intention and they rally behind you, things start to happen, you know, outside of what you're chasing as well, you know, which is really beautiful. And I think that's kind of the bedrock of the process in a way. It's like, it's all this preparation to eventually letting go as well. So we go into scenes and I know the emotional beats that I want to get, and I know the things that I want to convey and the things that we probably should say. But 9 times out of 10, like, simply being there and being in your spirit and in the character and present, things start to happen that are, it's like a channeling that you welcome in and that are even stronger than the scripted thing you're going for. And so much of me, so much of the process in the editing comes down to picking and choosing those moments. And that this process for me was actually really birthed out of being an actor for so long and realizing that the moments in between takes for me with the other actor, I was always chasing that. Like, it felt like that was always so much more interesting and so much more authentic and real. And then when they'd say rolling, I suddenly, you know, I even find that too in an interview too as well. Like, we're talking and then right before we start, there's that moment. And that moment before rolling is great though, because it also, cinema also needs a certain heightened thing as well too. You know, I don't think, I wouldn't be interested in just kind of sitting around and watching real life unfold in real time all the time. You need something to it.
Because I was wondering, I mean, why not documentary?
Right, right. I feel like for me, that would almost be, without sounding some kind of way, that would almost be a little easier. And also, that to me, it borderlines on a little bit of indulgent in a way that doesn't, like, because it would just be a straight up, I'm here to document this aspect of my life, which there are elements of my life that, don't get me wrong, I would totally want to do that for, and in particular with my mom and the work that she does. But I don't know, there's something more electric and more challenging to me to make stories up from these real moments, you know?
We've talked about your mom, and maybe you could, I don't know, I mean, I find it very interesting. I mean, on the one hand, if you work with your mother, and I've read something, or I heard her talk about it, and she said it was tough for her, it was very hard for her. And it deals with, you know, heavy topics, like she became a mother at a very young age. It talks about homelessness. Putting your mom through that is one thing, and maybe you could, you know, elaborate on that a little bit. First of all, with your mother, and then on the other hand, with very small children. And in the latest film with Bodhi, a film about death. Can a 3-year-old actually deal with that? Like,
I know it is. I look at it from an outside perspective, and I can realize, like, wow, that seems like a lot. You know, like, what do you? That's a lot, man. To ask, to enlist your family to explore these things with you. But the beautiful thing is that, like, I'm so straight up about it, and they want to, and they're saying yes, and their willingness to want to make a piece of art with me is such a tremendous gift. And I think because my mom and I's relationship is really unique, and she had me when she was so young. I mean, she was 16 when she got pregnant, and you know, it was a young, single teenage mom, and our relationship was definitely a little unconventional. You know, she was very much like my friend and my sister. And we experienced a lot of crazy stuff together. And interestingly enough, she was the first person to really kind of draw out of me my desire to perform, and imagination and creativity, and a little bit of escapism, you know, at the time. I would create characters and see films and kind of fantasize about a different life other than the extreme poverty that we were in at the time. And so when it, you know, comes around full circle to me asking my mom to be a part of a film, it's not like just asking your mother who's just been doing a, you know, an ordinary kind of 9-to-5 job her whole life, and that would be insane. To her, it was almost like it makes sense in its own weird way. That being said, it still was really, it was really hard. There were points on that film where I'd wake up in the morning and I had to remind myself, like, you asked for this, man. Like, you know, because we got into some stuff, you know, and she knew that though as well. And for me, my art is very therapeutic. I'm working things out. I'm trying to work things out with you as well too. You know, I want to create a vessel really that either opens you up or doesn't, you know.
Are there any topics you wouldn't include? I mean,
Yeah.
I've mentioned homelessness.
Yeah.
I didn't mention addiction problems.
Yeah.
Those are such heavy personal topics
Yeah.
that are, you know, huge traumas,
Yeah.
I guess, in your life. Anything you could say right now, I would never talk about that on film?
No. I'm at a point in my life now, especially more so than ever, where like I like crave vulnerability in folks, like and in the world, and for whatever reason, I think vulnerability is one of the first things that starts to happen. It allows you to be open to one another. When you're really willing to reveal yourself and be comfortable in doing that, that's how I grow. That's how I feel more relaxed as I get older and have moments of like real joy, not attached to particular things, you know, because for me right now, life is very much about taking and learning and gaining from experiences with other people as well. And I feel like you can only really get the good stuff when you're willing to be totally real, you know?
And when you give,
And when
basically.
you give. And
Yeah.
and
It's like that thing, I talk about it all the time really, like when you go to a party and there's a bunch of people standing around and everyone's kind of has like a mask on in a way, or a slight affront because they're at a party. And it's always that one person who's just like totally themselves, you know, just totally in their body and themselves. And it's like light, you know, and people, I find myself, that gives me permission to be like, oh, I can be myself as well too. You know, I feel like when people do that in life, it's such a beautiful
I
reminder.
mean, you're instantly attracted to it.
Totally.
Always, yeah. But, I mean, I wonder, you've been working as an actor for 20 years, I guess?
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone who's watching right now has seen a film with you
That'd be
acting
cool.
in it. It's Scott Pilgrim,
Yeah.
The Green Room. We've talked about Winterberg before and Lars von Trier. I don't know what else. I mean, you've worked with amazing directors, and does that still, you know, interest you a little bit to be an actor for another director and just do your lines?
It does, but in particular, I feel with folks like that, you know, but also too, like I'm so open to someone who's just written their first thing and wants to make their first film too. So I should also throw that out there as well too. I am. I think I wouldn't be totally honest if it hasn't gotten a little bit harder. It's a little bit more challenging to wrap my head around doing other stuff, and the bar has gotten raised even higher for me a bit, I'd say. I think that there has to be, to me, you have to demonstrate a really clear point of view, even if it's a genre film, whatever. Like, I want to know that you have some other intention besides just wanting to become a filmmaker, you know? And you know, like there needs to be something a bit deeper, you know?
I mean, I wonder, the way you approach films now seems like it's such a safe space for the people you work with, and you take care of them, and everyone takes care of each other, and it's very personal. But including your kids into film, do you even think about, do you think about that? Like,
totally.
if they become child actors, for example, if someone else finds them and sees how good, Bodhi is amazing. He's so wonderful. And I imagine that so many people would love to have him as a child actor. Would you, and Teresa, your wife, would you actually allow him to play in other people's films?
You know, it's really complicated. It's because I think initially our blanket answer to that would have been like, no, you know, not yet, no. I think we err a little bit more on the side of that. Now, at least, I'd have to see from him a real, true, genuine desire from himself, because I'm very mindful of what I put upon him. I gave him, I posed it to him as like, do you want to make a movie with Dad? And of course he's gonna say yes, right? So there is that awareness as a parent that I'm having my son participate in something with me that maybe if he were 15 or 16 years old, he'd be like, no, Dad, I don't want to do that. So it's an interesting little conundrum, but I'm okay with it because of the intention and the piece that it makes, and that I know that I'm trying to make. It's something that, like, vibrationally I feel like is good energetically. It's true, it's from my heart, it's from my soul, and I'm making it to hopefully connect with you and other folks and talk about these things that the film explores. And so, and Bodhi, who he is as a young little person, I trust that I'm right about knowing that ultimately he's okay with that. Now, that being said, he hasn't watched the film yet, and he couldn't in all its entirety. He's watched portions of it, because if he were to watch the whole film, it would really affect him.
Yeah, I imagine, of course.
And so the protecting him as a father is, like, first and foremost, and I feel so grateful that I'm able to do this, and that my children, want to participate with me, because I can't tell you, it's unbelievably fulfilling. It's like the most rewarding feeling.
Can you tell us a little bit how you actually worked on set with Bodhi? Like, what was a normal shooting day like?
Well, it was hard. It was hard. It was really hard because it was freezing cold.
Yeah.
It was.
You shot in Wales. Right?
In Wales. I mean, we were literally like where we go in the film, on the side of mountains and in the sea, was like so real. And that's what makes so much of the film work for me, is we were very much on a real adventure as a father and son in the forest with our swords, looking for something that we couldn't really fully define and that would change given what we were making up. And so that's a really exhilarating feeling, but it's also, for me, having, knowing that we're making a film and I need to specifically get lots of things, time always becomes an issue, right? Like when you're making a film, how you're using your time, how you're creating the space to make it feel like we have plenty of time and we're not losing time, right? Because that rushed kind of desperate feeling that comes into filmmaking sometimes, like, really undermines the process and you miss opportunities. So having Bodhi at this age, when you're 2-3 years old, generally for the most part, you're still so incredibly present. And that allows for things to happen, sequences to happen in real time with him that are extraordinary. And so for me, a lot of the working with him was really, it was having the best scene partner you could ever ask for, because it's not like a typical actor who's kind of, you're thinking about your words and trying to keep yourself grounded, but how am I going to say that thing that's coming up while you're in the middle of an exchange? Like, that's an interesting thing to navigate through as an actor and as a performer. And when you're older, you start to define it for yourself and you have different techniques. But when you're that young, he's just right there with me, and real emotions coming up.
So would you actually say that he was acting?
Yes.
It's acting.
Yeah,
it's still
both.
acting.
It's still both. So that's the thing. That's what's crazy about this one. And there's a, and I saw it with Isaac too when we made The End of Love, and that's why I knew that this was possible. and I could trust it even more than I did the first go around, is that inevitably what I saw with Isaac, and it happened with Bodhi, is you start to develop your technique. There, you know, with Bodhi, he was very much aware of the fact that we're making a film. He knows we're making something. He knows that Dad has been making movies for a really long time. He likes watching movies, and so he's aware of that, right? And so on some level, he's now, you know, he knows he's a performer, and action and cut are these really powerful, strong words, you know, bits of language that are used the most when you make a film. And those two words define a space of time, you know? And in between action and cut, sometimes it's 5 minutes. We can shoot like that. Sometimes I've rolled for probably well over 10 minutes, you know? But for the most part on this one, there were short little bursts, you know? And he started to know that, oh, I have to bring a little something more in a way, you know? And it was really beautiful to watch that happen to Bodhi and what came of that.
And how important was it that Bodhi's mom was also part of it? I guess pretty much.
It's huge. It's huge. And it's the, you know, it's the double whammy for me because she's an amazing performer, artist herself. And so that's an added bonus. It becomes almost like a luxury, you know, to know that she has that cinematic language in her head. And so when we would get to the moments where it's us together, it was like such a relief and such a deep breath for me. And it was beautiful because also that energy that was connected to just the making of it also is connected to my character, you know, like getting worn out and tired and being worried about being able to care for myself. It's easy to kind of siphon that and funnel that into the performance. You know, the me, Mark, as a overextended, super tired, you know, director / dad, can now harness that real energy and use it for the performance as well too. So that's also part of the process as well. I mean that's acting in general, obviously, but it gets really interestingly specific with the films that I make. You know.
How important is the team? I mean, I know that your DOP, I think, was working with you for all your films,
all
right?
Films, all of them. Yeah, that. The whole crew? Okay. Yeah, Patrice Cochette, my DP. Actually, we've done 6 films together because I first met him on a film that I just acted in, and he shot, and was so lucky to be able to work with him on my first film. And because of that experience being so lovely, we keep doing it. And that relationship right there, my relationship with Dustin, my producing partner, who's also my camera operator, my post-production supervisor, my assistant editor, my colorist, and helps with effects, like, that's a deep investment, you know, and it's those relationships. It's you get that telepathy that happens, you know, you get that deep, you know, trust, and it allows you to explore these things that are really challenging because there's just a tremendous amount of trust and knowing how we work. But I can't, like Patrice, it's magic. Like it's almost like we're able to communicate with each other, like where the camera should move within moments sometimes. And we are so aware of, you know, what we're both doing. We're like blocking in real time And it's amazing for me because so much is revealed to me too. You know, it's such a fun thing when you get to sit back in the edit and you watch that thing I was talking about earlier that, you know, kind of happens that's bigger than you, you know.
And what you've achieved with your latest film, I mean, of course it reminds me of Where the Wild Things Are in some moments. Yeah. And how does that you know, fantastical part, the fantasy part, how does that go together with your, you know, with this idea of reality?
Oh, because, okay, and it's been a realization I've had from making this movie. And it's so cool to like have those and to be able to talk about them because it's so much a part of why I make things and why I want to make art and tell stories. And I realized that, you know, I wanted to first become an actor to have a better life. And so I would start to fantasize and I would start to use my imagination and think about this dream life and daydream, you know. Daydreaming was huge for me, and then as you become an adult and, you know, for me, you make something like this and you realize like, oh wow, my imagination was the beginning of me cultivating a belief system. Mm-hmm. And that really me visualizing something and thinking about something that I want to have happen. I'm setting goals. I'm, you know, thinking about something and therefore causing it in some way. And so for me, I thought, you know, wow, my imagination is really, you know, me thinking. And sometimes, you know, if you focus on something that feels like you're, you know, a part of your wildest imagination, if you focus on it enough, it'll come true, you know? Like this thing that the cliche thing that we talk about, like your dreams can come true if you focus on them. Like that shit is real. It's real. I mean, it's really like how anything in this world has happened. Really, it's, you think it and you cause it. And people come together and stuff happens. And so for me, I'm like, oh wow, the distinction between reality and my imagination is like, is there really one? Yeah. That's the thing, you know? And so that's the kind of the biggest takeaway for me with this as well, because it was important for me transitionally in this movie to go in and out of fantasy and reality in a way that felt as effortless as possible. That felt really easy, you know, as opposed to like such an in-your-face device, you know, or like a thematic kind of like trope. I wanted to take the edge off of that. Because transitions are hard in film, you know, they're everything, you know, how you come in and out of things, and so, and that speaks to part of this thing of like, what is, you know, reality is really defined by what you're thinking, you know?
Do you consider yourself, I'm looking for the word, because, I mean, for someone who's been in the movie industry for 20 years, and I deliberately used the word industry. Oh, yeah. And Antonio Banderas yesterday used the word factory for Hollywood. And the way you talk about filmmaking seems like you're from another universe.
Oh, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. I love that.
Antonio Banderas,
yeah.
How did you keep that?
I think, okay, well, you know, in this lottery of being born, right, I got lucky enough to be born to an incredible young woman. And so it starts there. And my mom, it's just that, you know, it's that classic thing of like, and I see it so much in my life of people who have faced extraordinary adversity in their lives and struggle, one of two things happens. Like, you either die and become miserable, or your life is horrible and short, or you become so resilient and giving and extra loving and extra compassionate. And I was lucky that that happened with my mom. You know, that my mom tapped into compassion really as a teenage single mom. And it was because of that. That's like an extraordinary thing that happened. And it's really important for me to honor that, because that's really where it started for me. I was lucky enough to be born to this incredible young warrior woman.
But were you never tempted? I mean, becoming an actor at a young age,
Yes.
and people book you for your good looks, and you know, were you never tempted to be, you know, consumed by that? By that world, like a more superficial world?
No, I never was there was never any real temptation. There was always actually quite the opposite, like a very strong resistance. And that is because of where I grew up, my mom, and the people and things that I was exposed to were like the antithesis of what this factory creates, what this industry creates. And so I was very attuned to, oh, that's the ugly, gross, sad, miserable side of things. You know, but on a bigger level, like, I could talk about ego as well too. I mean, we all have egos, right? So it's like, that's also an interesting journey that every artist goes on, right? And you're constantly, at least for me, I feel like you're always taking a look at that, you know? And so my first little tastes of like fame or acknowledgement for my stuff was really interesting for me at first, because there was my younger self, there was a lot of me that really needed your validation. I needed your approval. I wanted you to like me. I wanted to be loved. You know, the life that I was, you know, living at the time, insecurity and self-esteem issues were very real, you know, and also being a young person, like, and so,
Sure, yeah.
You know, so there was this, I guess, a bit of a temptation and an allure to the idea that fame or money were gonna maybe make me a little bit more happy or a little bit more okay, and of course, checks out, that's bullshit as well, you know what I mean? And it's like, it doesn't matter how many times you hear it and you can know it, it's like we all have to experience that in our own way for it to really click. And that clicked for me early on enough. So I was like, that made me generally really safe from any of that stuff. And I also I came up with a group of people who at the time too, just like culturally, like integrity, and from like being where I was from, that's like fundamental. Like if you go against like who you say you are, like that's horrendous, you know? And so, you know, I went into this industry with a very specific plan of what I wanted to do and the experiences that I wanted to have and the types of people that I wanted to work with. And so I got, you know, I think just so lucky and fortunate to have been born into struggle, really, because it shows you glaringly how vapid and shallow and fake, how it's an illusion, the success that comes from being in an industry, you know?
Yeah, I understand.
And where art meets commerce, that's the most tricky thing about what we do. It's like, sometimes it's like, it really makes me so sad, you know? Like, I was just talking with Dustin the other day. You know, and I eventually want to get to a point in my life where, like, I just put my movies out for free. Like, really, purely from my heart. I'm so sick of the amount of money a movie makes is the barometer for its success, you know? That's really sad to me.
So could you see yourself working as an actor, as, you know, as a job, to make money, to, you know...
Yeah, to continue to eventually just put my work out for free
and
if
separate
possible.
that from your directing work?
In a way, it's been nice because it's been functioning like that for me, you know? It's like it keeps me in this nice little loop. I go and I work on someone else's film, and I get to really show up and be of service. That's the way I look at it, even more so than ever. You know, it's like I know more than when I first started how every single person there is so vital and important, and how energy on a set, vibes and energy are everything. And so I get to show up and remain fiercely positive, wide open, and super supportive, you know, because I know just how challenging it is in this new way. And then inevitably towards the end of someone else's film, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go do my own thing now, you know. So it's great.
It seems like a perfect plan. I mean, and a perfect combination of things.
Yeah. The thing that's tricky though is that, like, as you start to kind of continue to evolve and wake up, as I call it for myself, and become conscious to, you know, these bigger things that we're kind of touching on in terms of the industry, and you know,
don't want to be a part of it anymore.
No, yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, you're like, oh, and you also start to really wake up to, okay, the things that I'm choosing to participate in as an actor, it's like a really, yeah, no, and it's a big deal too on some level. Like, just starting to think about, you know, I think there are some films now that are being made and have been, and television that have been made and are continuing to be made that are not great for, I think, just like culturally, the world in a way. There are some things that are kind of just like bad, like totally contrived in this really manufactured way that's just kind of like, don't do that, you know. And sometimes some of those things are solely for money. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I've just kind of, I know it may sound a little bit extreme, but I'm like, okay, if you choose to play a hardcore, fucked up rapist in a film, that's your character, right? Okay. Well, that rape, that horrible thing that happens, why specifically is that happening in this film? You know, and how are we showing that? And what is, you know, and clearly, obviously, your story has to be amazing, right? This intention, these things. Anyway, so I'm saying that, like, it used to be a little bit easier for me to just, oh, that's a crazy fucked up character in a movie, and oh, I'll do that. But I take a closer look now.
You become more critical and ask, why is that actually needed? Is that just a lazy device for making someone look bad? Yeah. So he's a rapist, and so we show sexual violence, and
there's those things.
The Game of Thrones debate, for example.
Totally.
Like, and they use rape when they don't know what else to say. Mm-hmm. I didn't say that. I'm not offending. No, I did say that, and I mean it.
Yeah, and that's the truth, and I think it's really important to wake up to that stuff and to consider that. And I think, you know, I'm just grateful that that's happening and happens to me. You know, I think that's the biggest factor for me in life in general, but certainly as an artist, I need to be growing and evolving and considering bigger things it's also just part of becoming an adult too, really, you know?
So since we're talking about energy and I'm sure that you can already tell us, you've been here in Munich for 2 days now?
Yeah.
So can you feel the city?
Yes.
What is Munich like?
Chill. I get a real chill vibe from Munich. And like walking around in the residential areas for me, these last couple days, it's been so beautiful and so peaceful. And then I walk through next to the river, and that is gorgeous. The fact that you guys can also like flow down the river and people hop in the train back, like that blows my mind. I'm like, what a great thing that a city has, that this is like a thing. It's funny, I just went white water rafting a couple weeks ago. So I'm looking at the river and I don't know, just like water coming down from a mountain, flowing like that. It's kind of magical. There's a couple people here that I've met who speak to living in Berlin, right? And the value that they get from coming up to Munich and the river specifically, and how that feels like a really cleansing, grounding, kind of re-energizing source. And I love that it runs through the city. But it's been really chill for me. I feel like, and inspired too, you know?
Yeah, I think you've experienced the hottest days we've had in ages.
Yeah.
So it feels like California.
It does, and I know I have that in the back of my head as well too. I'm like, it's not normally like this crazy hot.
No, come back in February. then we talk about the river and how chill everything is. It's gonna be chill, yeah. And your thoughts on our festival? I mean, you're very, very festival. You're pro.
I mean, I'll go off. This has been extraordinary. I mean, the fact that we're here having this conversation too as a part of this is like deeply meaningful to me and so cool, because it's like, it's just so cool. And that, I think if a festival wasn't good and awesome, opportunities like this for me wouldn't be happening. And like walking around in the main hub there, and even, I know it sounds silly, but just the signage, like the big sign right there, like the production behind it is like, it's awesome. There's like, there's a lot of care and thought. And when I'm in there, it feels like bustling with real energy of folks who are excited to see movies. Yeah. And I want to just stand in there and feel that, because I'm like, these people genuinely are excited about these films that are here. And I love that. Our screening last night was extraordinary for me. It was so beautiful. And this is the real deal. Like, Munich Film Festival, it's the real deal. And it's like, it's so encouraging and it's so energizing and inspiring for me, because you know, you make indies, you make independent films, and I was talking about this last night. Film festivals actually end up becoming like distribution in its own way. Actually more meaningful distribution than sitting in a theater for a weekend, right? Like, because there's a whole infrastructure and a built-in, you know, audience that you hope for. And there feels like a built-in audience here. And that audience, to me, loves cinema and is really exciting. The Q&A that happened last night was with people I feel like just on a base level are engaging with movies in a way that is really meaningful and really cool. And I think that's because of this festival, you know, like being here as well.
That makes us, of course, very happy.
It's amazing. It seriously is amazing.
So please come back every year.
I would love to.
Or you could just start working here. If you like, even you like the sign.
I'm gonna go hang up signs.
So thank you very, very much for your time,
so
Mark.
much.
Thank you very, very much. How many more screenings will be there?
2 more, yep. Tomorrow night and then Wednesday. Yep.
So you all have to check out Mark's film, and you can do the promo.
Please come see The Place of No Words. and we'll talk about it afterwards, that's been amazing. The Q&As, it's amazing.
I feel like I've done yoga now because we've been so spiritual and
I feel so good too. Like honestly, like this, but this is, it's like, it's funny. It does kind of speak to everything that I'm trying to do right now anyway, right? Like even this, or, you know, an interview. Like I feel like I just had a deep and meaningful conversation with you, and that's so rad. So thank you for that.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you guys. This was awesome.
Danke.